My name is Colin Reed, and I need you to understand something before I go any further. I used to think Bigfoot was a joke, the kind of thing you see on grainy TV shows at 2 in the morning, right between ghost hunters and ancient aliens. I'd spent 15 years hiking the backcountry of Virginia and West Virginia, logged over 3,000 miles on trails from the Shenandoah to the Monongahela, and never saw anything I couldn't explain. Bears, sure. Coyotes, bobcats, even a mountain lion once near Seneca Rocks. But nothing that made me believe in fairy tales. That changed on October 12th, 2023, in the Dolly Sods Wilderness. I was leading a small group, just 3 clients on a 5-day trek through some of the most remote terrain in West Virginia. I'd been running these guided expeditions for the past 8 years, building a reputation for finding the places most tourists never reached. The Dolly Sods area was perfect for that. 40,000 acres of rocky plateaus, ancient spruce forests, and cranberry bogs that looked more like the Canadian tundra than Appalachia. Cell service was non-existent. The nearest road was 12 miles behind us. My clients were Wade Pickett, a 52-year-old engineer from Richmond who'd done plenty of weekend camping but wanted to push himself. His daughter Annabelle, 26, a nurse who'd inherited his love of the outdoors. And Floyd Yates, 61, a retired schoolteacher from Charleston who was checking items off his bucket list. Good people, experienced enough to handle the terrain, green enough to still be excited about it. We'd been hiking for 2 days when things started feeling wrong. The first sign was the silence. I noticed it around mid-afternoon on day 3 as we approached Red Creek. The forest had gone quiet, not the peaceful quiet of a lazy afternoon, but the kind of absence that makes your skin prickle. No birds, no squirrels chittering in the branches. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. "Getting spooky out here," Wade said, adjusting his pack. "Where'd all the wildlife go?" I told him it happened sometimes, though truthfully it had been years since I'd experienced it this pronounced. Animals flee from predators. Something big was in the area. Then we found the tree breaks. Just past the creek crossing, a series of saplings had been snapped at about 8 feet high, twisted and bent in a way that suggested enormous force. Some were finger-thick birches that would require serious strength to break. "Storm damage?" Annabelle asked. "Maybe." But there hadn't been any significant weather in the past week, and these breaks looked fresh. Sap still sticky, inner wood bright and pale. Floyd was examining something near the base of one of the broken trees. "Colin, you need to see this." It was a footprint, massive. Pressed deep into the soft mud near the creek bank, the track measured at least 18 inches long and 7 wide. 5 toes clearly visible, with what looked like dermal ridges in the heel impression. "Bear," Wade suggested, though his voice had gone uncertain. "Bears don't walk on 2 legs." I pulled out my phone and took several photos, using my boot for scale. The print was wider at the front, the toes splayed in a distinctly primate configuration. I'd seen plenty of bear tracks. This wasn't one. "Could be a hoax," I said, more to reassure them than because I believed it. We were 12 miles from the nearest trailhead. Nobody came out here to plant fake Bigfoot tracks. Annabelle had gone pale. "My friend Jenna is obsessed with those Finding Bigfoot shows. She's always sending me clips about the Grassman, says West Virginia is like the hot spot. I thought it was all bullshit." "It probably is." But my hand was steady as I took more photos, documenting the track from multiple angles. The print was too perfect, too detailed. Either someone had put serious effort into a hoax in one of the most remote locations in the state, or something very large and bipedal had walked through here recently. We pressed on, but the atmosphere had shifted. Everyone was looking over their shoulders now, jumping at shadows. When we made camp that evening near a rocky overhang, I found myself choosing the spot more carefully than usual. Good sight lines, our backs to stone, clear approaches from all directions. Around midnight, I woke to a sound that didn't belong. Thud. Thud, thud, wood striking wood, rhythmic and deliberate, echoing through the dark forest. 3 hits, then silence, then 3 more from a different direction. "You hear that?" Wade's whisper came from his tent. "Yeah." I was already pulling on my boots, reaching for my headlamp. The wood knocks continued for maybe 5 minutes, moving around our camp in a rough circle, always staying just beyond the reach of our firelight. When they finally stopped, the silence that followed felt heavy, expectant, like something was watching us decide what to do next. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. None of us did. Dawn brought a thin mist that clung to the bogs and made the spruce trees look like they were floating. I'd been checking my trail cameras. I always set up a few around camp to capture wildlife footage for my website, when I found something that made my mouth go dry. "Everyone needs to see this." The 4 of us crowded around my laptop as I pulled up the footage from camera 3, positioned about 40 yards from camp facing a game trail. The timestamp read 1:47 a.m. For the first few seconds, nothing but darkness and the IR glow picking out tree trunks. Then something moved into frame from the left. At first, I thought it was a bear standing on its hind legs, but it kept walking, smooth bipedal strides, arms swinging naturally at its sides. The creature was massive, easily 8 feet tall, covered in dark reddish-brown hair that caught the infrared light. Its shoulders were impossibly broad, the chest barrel-shaped and powerful. Then it turned its head toward the camera, and I felt ice crystallize in my veins. The face was a nightmare hybrid of human and ape, a flat, pushed-in nose, heavy brow ridge casting shadows over eyes that reflected the IR light with an eerie green glow. The jaw protruded slightly, but the overall structure was far too human to dismiss as any known animal. For 3 seconds that felt like an eternity, it stared directly at the camera, head tilted as if considering the device and what it meant. "Jesus Christ," Floyd breathed. That can't be real." But it was. The footage was crisp, well lit by the infrared, showing every detail of musculature moving under hair, the flecks of massive fingers, the intelligence in those eyes. This wasn't a person in a suit. The proportions were wrong, the movement too fluid, the sheer size impossible to fake. The creature took 2 more steps, then seemed to blur as it moved off screen with a speed that shouldn't have been possible for something so large. Annabelle was shaking. "We need to leave. Right now." "Agreed," Wade said immediately. "Pack up, head back to the trailhead, get somewhere with cell service and call." "Who do you even call for this?" I was already reviewing the other camera footage. Camera 1 had captured a similar figure moving through the trees around 1:52 a.m. Camera 2 showed something enormous throwing what looked like a rock toward our camp at 2:03 a.m. I remembered hearing a distant crash I'd attributed to falling deadwood. "There's more than one," I said quietly. "Look at the timestamps. These are different angles, but if it was the same creature, it would have had to move impossibly fast between locations." The implications settled over us like a physical weight. We weren't dealing with a lone animal. We were dealing with a group, maybe a family, all of them easily capable of killing any one of us with their bare hands. We broke camp in record time, everyone moving with the jerky efficiency of barely controlled panic. I downloaded all the camera footage to my laptop and phone. Multiple backups, because some part of my brain was already thinking about what came after. Evidence, proof, the kind of documentation that could change everything. The hike back should have taken 2 days at a moderate pace. We were planning to do it in 1, pushing hard to get out of these mountains. We made it about 6 miles before we realized we weren't alone. The smell hit us first. A overwhelming stench like rotten meat mixed with wet dog and something musky. Organic. Wrong. It was so powerful it made my eyes water. "What is that?" Annabelle had her shirt pulled up over her nose. Then we heard it. A long, low howl that started deep and climbed to a shriek that seemed to vibrate in my chest. It came from ahead of us, somewhere on the trail between us and the trailhead. A second howl answered from behind us. "Off trail," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Now, head east, stay quiet, move fast." We crashed through the underbrush, all pretense of stealth abandoned. Behind us, something large was moving through the forest, branches snapping like gunshots. The footfalls were heavy enough that I could feel them through the ground. Floyd stumbled and Wade caught him. "Keep moving! Keep moving!" I risked a glance back and saw it. A massive silhouette moving between the trees, maybe 50 yards behind us. Easily keeping pace. Not running, not even hurrying, just following. Herding us. We burst into a small clearing, and I made a decision. The rocks. That overhang we passed yesterday. If we can get there, we can defend a position. Defend with what? Annabelle's voice was climbing toward hysteria. What the fuck do we defend against that? But she was running with us, all of us moving toward the only shelter I could think of. The overhang was maybe 2 miles away. 2 miles through forest, where something that outweighed us, outran us, and knew the terrain better than we ever would was actively hunting us. We'd made it maybe a mile when we heard Annabelle scream. I spun around to see Annabelle on the ground, Wade pulling frantically at her arm. 20 feet behind them, stepping out from behind a massive oak, was the creature from my footage. In daylight, it was worse. The hair was darker than the infrared had shown, a deep auburn brown that caught the filtered sunlight. Its face, God, that face, was a mask of focused intelligence. Not rage, not mindless animal fury, just cold, calculating attention as it studied us. The muscles in its chest and shoulders shifted as it moved forward, each step deliberate, testing our response. I did the only thing I could think of. I ran at it, screaming, waving my arms, trying to make myself look bigger, more threatening. Every wilderness instinct I'd ever developed told me this was suicide, but Annabelle was down and frozen with terror. The creature stopped, tilted its head. For a moment that stretched like taffy, it watched me charge toward it. Then it moved. I'd seen videos of silverback gorillas moving. This was like that, but faster. It crossed the distance between us in 3 strides, and I got one close look at a hand the size of a catcher's mitt before Floyd slammed into me from the side, knocking us both behind a fallen log. "Run!" he screamed. "Get them to the rocks!" Wade had gotten Annabelle up and was half dragging her forward. I grabbed Floyd's jacket, trying to pull him with me, but he shoved me hard. I'm 61 years old with bad knees. You 3 have a chance. Go. The creature was circling around the log, moving with that impossible silent grace despite its size. Floyd stood up, pulled out a small canister from his belt, bear spray, and emptied it directly into the creature's face. It didn't even slow down. The last thing I saw before Wade physically hauled me away was Floyd's face, resigned and brave and terrified all at once as that massive shape enveloped him. The sound that followed, a truncated scream cut off mid-breath, the wet crunch of bone. Those sounds will follow me to my grave. We ran, arms pumping, hearts hammering, lungs burning. Behind us, something howled, a sound of triumph, of pack communication. More crashing in the undergrowth. They were flanking us again. The overhang appeared through the trees like salvation. Wade practically threw Annabelle toward it, and I scrambled up after her, turning to reach back for him. He was 30 feet away when the second creature stepped into his path. This one was smaller, maybe 7 feet, with lighter, almost gray-brown hair. Female, I thought distantly, because she moved with a different grace, and because the larger creature was suddenly there beside her, and the body language between them was clear even across species. Mated pair. Pack hunters. Wade backed toward the rocks, hands up, making himself small and non-threatening. "It's okay," he said, voice shaking but trying for calm. "It's okay, we're leaving. We're not a threat." The male creature moved forward. Wade tried to run. He almost made it 5 steps. Annabelle was screaming, a raw sound of grief and horror that echoed off the rocks. I grabbed her, pulled her back into the deepest part of the overhang, a narrow space between boulders that something 8 feet tall couldn't reach into. We wedged ourselves in there as the light began to fail, and the sounds of feeding carried across the clearing. Annabelle buried her face in my jacket and sobbed silently. I held her and watched the entrance to our shelter and tried not to think about what those sounds meant. As darkness fell, they came closer. I could hear them moving around the overhang, testing it. A massive hand reached into the gap once, fingers splayed, feeling for us. We pressed farther back, barely breathing. The hand withdrew. Then came the wood knocks all around us. Communication, strategy. We could hear at least 3 distinct individuals, maybe 4. One would knock, another would answer. They were coordinating, planning. They threw rocks, not huge boulders. The overhang protected us from those, but fist-sized stones hurled with enough force to shatter against the rock face. Psychological warfare, letting us know they could hurt us anytime they wanted, wearing us down. Around midnight, they started screaming, long, howling shrieks that sounded almost human, almost words, but twisted into something that bypassed rational thought and hit the lizard brain directly. Pure, distilled terror. Annabelle hadn't spoken in hours. She just shook, pressed against me, occasionally making small whimpering sounds. I kept my headlamp off to preserve battery. In the darkness, I could see their eyes sometimes, green reflective gleam caught by moonlight, always moving, always watching, waiting. They hunted us for 36 hours. That first night under the overhang, we huddled together while they prowled the perimeter. Every hour or so, one would approach the entrance, and I'd see a massive silhouette blocking the moonlight. They'd stand there, patient, then retreat, testing whether we'd panicked and run. We didn't run. We couldn't. The overhang was maybe 8 feet deep, 4 feet wide at the opening, narrowing to 2 feet at the back where we'd wedged ourselves. It was the only thing keeping us alive. Dawn brought no relief. Through the narrow gap, I could see them, 3 distinct individuals now clearly visible. The massive male, easily 8.5 feet tall, with reddish-brown hair and scars across his chest that suggested age and experience. The female, smaller but still 7 feet of corded muscle, moving with predatory grace. And a younger one, maybe adolescent, perhaps 6.5 feet, with darker hair and an eagerness in its movements that was somehow worse than the adult's calculated patience. They dragged what was left of Wade into our line of sight. Deliberate placement, 60 feet from the overhang entrance. A message, a warning, a promise. Annabelle had stopped crying. She just sat there, eyes vacant, occasionally sipping from our shared water bottle. We'd combined our supplies, 2 bottles of water, some trail mix, energy bars. Maybe 2 days' worth if we rationed carefully. Our packs were still out in the clearing where we'd dropped them during the run to the overhang. "They're smart," I whispered, more to myself than to her. "They're using pack tactics. The male stays visible, keeps us pinned. The female circles, looks for weaknesses. The young one, I think it's learning, watching." "Stop." Annabelle's voice was hoarse. "Just stop talking." But I couldn't. My brain was cycling through options, discarding them one by one. Make a run for it in daylight. Suicide. They were faster. Wait them out. We'd die of dehydration first. Call for help. No signal. And even if there was, who would we call? Forest Service? Local police? What would we even say? The male approached around midday, walked right up to the overhang entrance, casual as you please, and squatted down. Those eyes. Christ. Those eyes. studied us with an intelligence that was somehow worse than mindless animal rage would have been. It knew we were trapped. It knew we were helpless. And something in that face suggested it was enjoying this. It reached in, arm extending, fingers splayed. We pressed back until stone cut into our shoulders. The fingers came within a foot of Annabelle's boot before withdrawing. It could have grabbed her, chose not to, playing with its food. Then it did something that made my blood freeze. It vocalized, a series of guttural sounds that had rhythm, pattern, structure, language. Not human language, but language nonetheless. And the female, somewhere behind it, answered with a similar sequence. They were talking. About us. About the hunt. About what came next. That second night was worse. They'd figured out they could reach under the overhang lip at certain angles, and massive hands would suddenly appear, feeling blindly for us. We'd shift positions, press ourselves into different configurations between the rocks, every muscle screaming. No sleep, no rest, just endless vigilance and mounting terror. Annabelle finally spoke around 3 a.m. My dad was right. He said we should have stayed home. He said... Her voice broke. He died trying to save me. He died being brave. He died. She turned to look at me, and her eyes were empty. We're going to die. You know that, right? Even if we get out of here, they'll follow us, hunt us down. They know we have proof. They know what we've seen. I wanted to tell her she was wrong. Couldn't. She might have been right. The third dawn, October 15th, brought rain. Heavy, cold, the kind of Appalachian downpour that turns trails to rivers and reduces visibility to 20 feet. We trapped water in our empty bottles, drank greedily. The rain gave us something else too. Sound cover. We have to try, I said. During the next heavy squall, they won't be able to track us as easily in this. They'll catch us. You saw how fast they move. Maybe, but we're definitely dead if we stay here. Water's one thing. Food runs out today. The male was still visible through the rain, standing about 40 yards out, seemingly unbothered by the downpour. But the female and juvenile were gone, probably seeking shelter. This might be our only chance. We waited for the rain to intensify. Around 10 a.m., it came, a deluge that reduced the forest to gray shapes and white noise. The male's silhouette vanished into the rain. Now, low and fast, head down slope, try to find that creek. Follow it toward the drainage. Move. We squeezed out of the overhang and ran. The forest was a nightmare of mud and roots and rain. We slipped, fell, hauled ourselves up, kept moving. I had my GPS unit, 12.8 miles to the trailhead. Might as well have been 100. We made it maybe a quarter mile before we heard it. A howl cutting through the rain. Close. Too close. Answered by another from our left. They'd found us. Of course they had. Split up, I gasped. You go left, stay low, follow any water. I'll draw them off. No. You're faster without me. Go. Annabelle hesitated one more second, then crashed off to the left. I went right, making as much noise as possible, snapping branches, yelling. Come get me. Let her have a chance. Something massive moved through the trees behind me. I risked a glance back and saw the male moving through the forest like it wasn't there, like the underbrush and fallen logs were suggestions rather than obstacles. Closing distance. I ran harder, lungs burning, vision tunneling. The creek appeared ahead and I splashed into it, using the water to try and mask my scent, following it downstream. Behind me, branches snapped. A hand the size of a dinner plate grabbed my backpack, yanked me off my feet. I twisted, slipped the pack straps, fell into the creek, scrambled forward on hands and knees, got my feet under me, ran. The creature roared, a sound that was part frustration, part challenge. It was playing with me. Could have ended this any time. Was choosing not to. I don't know how long that chase lasted. Time had lost meaning. There was only run and breathe and try not to fall because falling meant dying. The creek led me into rougher terrain, rocks and small falls. I was slowing down. It was getting closer. Then I heard the engine, and a TV incredibly, impossibly somewhere ahead. I crashed through the last stand of trees and found myself on a rutted trail. A mud-splattered four-wheeler sat there, and a man in camo was staring at me with wide eyes. "Drive!" I screamed. "Go, go, go!" To his credit, he didn't ask questions. Just gunned the engine, and I threw myself on the back as the creature burst out of the tree line 30 feet behind us. The last thing I saw before we rounded a bend was its face, a mixture of rage and something else. Calculation. Memorization. It was making sure it would remember me. The ranger station at Seneca Shadows was 12 miles from where the ATV driver dropped me off. His name was Cletus Combs, a local hunter who'd been checking some trail cams. He didn't ask many questions, just looked at my torn clothes and wild eyes and drove me to where there were people and phones and the illusion of safety. The police came first, then the Forest Service. Then, quietly, some men in unmarked SUVs who said they were from a wildlife management office I'd never heard of. They all asked the same questions in different ways. What happened? Where are the bodies? What did you see? I told them everything, showed them the footage on my phone, played the videos of the creature walking through our camp, the massive bipedal figure moving with purpose and intelligence. They watched, took notes, exchanged glances. "Mr. Reed," the lead detective said carefully, "you've been through a serious trauma. 3 days in the wilderness, 2 people dead, another missing. Stress can do strange things to perception. What you're describing is right there on the video. What we see," one of the federal men said, "could be interpreted several ways. Black bears, when they stand upright, that was not a fucking bear." They brought in a psychologist, asked about my mental health history, suggested perhaps the stress of responsibility, of losing clients, had caused me to create a narrative that made sense of tragedy. The footage was inconclusive. The bodies, what they recovered, showed signs of large predator activity. Mountain lion, possibly. Aggressive black bear. These things happened in the wilderness. "We found Annabelle Pickett," the detective told me on day 3. 4 miles from where you separated. She'd fallen from a ridge, appears to have broken her neck. Or something broke it for her. The medical examiner will make that determination. But I knew what that determination would be. Accident. Tragic, but explainable. Nothing that required believing in monsters. They held me for a week. Protective custody, they called it, though it felt like interrogation. The federal men were particularly interested in my footage, made copies, made me sign forms, suggested that continuing to publicize this particular interpretation of events might have legal consequences regarding disturbing an active investigation. When they finally let me go, my footage was gone. Not deleted, I had backups, but the files were corrupted. Every single one. The crystal clear video of the creature walking past my camera, the shots of it watching us, all reduced to digital noise and artifacts. Technical failure, they said. Sometimes happens with SD cards exposed to moisture. The corrupted files were on 3 separate devices that hadn't been near each other or water, but nobody wanted to hear that. The official report came out a month later. 3 people dead in a tragic wilderness accident. Evidence of bear activity in the area. Victims likely surprised a sow with cubs. No criminal charges filed. Case closed. I tried going to the media. Local news gave me 5 minutes, treated it like a human interest piece. Local guides' close call with nature. My insistence about what really happened got edited to speculation about what might have been a Bigfoot. The footage corruption was mentioned but not investigated. After the story aired, I got calls from Bigfoot enthusiast groups, conspiracy theorists, and people who wanted to mock me on social media. Nobody with any authority wanted to hear the truth. It's been 14 months since Dolly Sods. I live in Richmond now, 4th floor apartment, no woods in sight. I haven't been back to the mountains. Can't. The smell of pine, the sound of wind in trees. It brings me back to that overhang, watching those eyes reflect moonlight as they circled, patient, inevitable. I don't guide anymore. Can't tell people the wilderness is safe when I know it isn't. Can't lead them into forests that might contain things we've convinced ourselves don't exist. But I keep looking, keep researching, keep finding patterns nobody else seems to want to acknowledge. There are dozens of disappearances in the national forests every year. Hundreds, if you expand to state forests and wilderness areas. Experienced hikers who vanish without a trace. Bodies found in impossible locations. Tracks that are dismissed as hoaxes or misidentifications. Stories from indigenous peoples going back centuries about the wild men or forest giants that are treated as folklore rather than warning. I found Floyd Yates's body last year. Not officially. I wasn't there. Couldn't be there. But a hunter posted photos online of something he found near Bear Rocks, remains that were probably a bear kill, according to Forest Service. I recognized Floyd's jacket, what was left of it. The hunter described massive tracks around the site, 18 inches long, 5 toes, bipedal stride. The photos stayed online for 6 hours before the original post was removed. I've collected other footage too. Trail cam images from across Appalachia, the Pacific Northwest, the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. Always corrupted or blurry, but occasionally you get one clear frame. Something tall, bipedal, covered in hair, watching the camera with unmistakable intelligence. These images disappear quickly. Sites go down, accounts get suspended, but they're out there if you know where to look. I dream about them most nights. The male creature squatting at the overhang entrance, those eyes studying us like we were ants in a jar. The sounds of feeding in the darkness. The howls that bypassed rational thought and hit something older, something that remembers when humans were prey. I've lost most of my friends. Hard to maintain relationships when you can't go camping, can't have backyard barbecues if they back onto tree lines, can't explain why you wake up screaming. My ex-girlfriend lasted 3 months after Dolly Sods before deciding I needed more help than she could provide. The therapist I saw for a while wanted to discuss PTSD, trauma processing, cognitive behavioral therapy. Couldn't tell her that the trauma wasn't just what happened. It was knowing what's still out there. What's watching. What's waiting for the next group of hikers who wander too far from the safe trails, who ignore the local legends and indigenous warnings because we've convinced ourselves we're the apex predator. We're not. I keep the corrupted footage. Call it insurance, evidence, a reminder. I've tried every recovery method I can find. Sometimes I get fragments, a frame that shows an arm too long, shoulders too broad. Enough to confirm I didn't imagine it, not enough to convince anyone else. There are others who know. I found them online, people who've seen things they can't explain, had their evidence confiscated or destroyed, been told they misidentified bears, or suffering from exposure-induced hallucinations. We share stories in private forums that get shut down regularly. We recognize each other's trauma. But even we don't talk publicly. What's the point? Nobody wants to believe. Last month, I got a message from someone claiming to work for that wildlife management office. No name, burner email that bounced immediately after I replied. The message said, "Stop looking. Stop talking. What happened in Dolly Sods was an outlier. You were unlucky. Don't make it worse." The implication was clear. There are people who know these things exist, who monitor them, who perhaps have been covering up evidence for longer than we can guess, and those people want it to stay covered up. I think about Annabelle sometimes, about her falling from that ridge, or being thrown, or having her neck snapped and then positioned to look like a fall. About Wade, brave and terrified, backing away from something that shouldn't exist while trying to tell it he meant no harm. About Floyd, 61 years old with bad knees, buying us time with his life. They died because we didn't believe, because I led them into territory where we were food, not tourists, because the comfortable lie that Bigfoot is a hoax or misidentification is easier than accepting we share this world with something that sees us as prey. I'm writing this because someone needs to know the truth, even if nobody believes it. If you go into the deep wilderness, the real wilderness, miles from roads, where the forests are old and the animals go quiet for no apparent reason, you need to understand what you're risking. Those things are out there. They're intelligent, coordinated, and they've been avoiding documentation for centuries because they understand what happens when humans know something exists. They're not the gentle giants of campfire stories. They're apex predators with human-level intelligence and the physical power to tear us apart. If you find massive footprints, leave. If the forest goes silent, leave. If you hear wood knocks or howls that don't sound like any animal you recognize, leave immediately. If locals warn you about certain areas, specific valleys or ridges where people disappear, believe them. The indigenous peoples knew. They tried to tell us. We called it superstition. I can't prove any of this. My footage is corrupted. My witnesses are dead. The authorities have their official story and they're sticking to it. But I was there. I saw. And I'll carry those 3 days in dolly sods for the rest of my life. The wilderness is beautiful. It's also dangerous in ways we've convinced ourselves don't exist anymore. In ways we've decided to ignore because the alternative, that we're not actually at the top of the food chain in every environment, is too terrifying to accept. I'm not going back to the mountains, but you might. And if you do, just remember, when the forest goes quiet and you feel eyes watching from the tree line, when you find tracks that are too big and too human and too wrong, you're not imagining it. You're being hunted.